So, have you ever dreamed of running away to sea and being a scientist for a major cruise line? Did your dreams when you were a kid involve the ocean? Maybe you didn't even know that there was this incredible world of STEM available to you. Our guest today is somebody that I wish I could have grown up to be. Dr. Kimberly Galvez is one of the coolest scientists out there, and I am so excited to be able to have you talk to her today on the Adventures in Learning podcast. Dr. Kim, welcome to the show.
It's still valuable data because they archive it all. And so by using the archive, they're able to create then climate models. All the information you can get from the present and the past can help us dictate potentially what will happen in the future. So it's all still valuable information. Hi, thank you so much, Diane, for having me on, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Well, it was such a delight to get to meet you on the Viking Octantis. You're the chief scientist, is that correct?
Yes, I am the chief scientist on Viking Octantis, where I run an entire research lab, a whole science lab that we have built into the actual expedition ship.
So tell us a little bit about that, because that's very different than expeditions and cruises used to be. What is the role of a scientist on a ship?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's very different than what a normal cruise ship or expedition ships have been in the past. But with Viking, they created this entire new frame of system. And so they thought, okay, let's go to a new place. And then on top of it, let's just not bring guests on board to get to experience it, but we want the guests to really get to know what they're doing. And because we're in such remote areas that don't always have the availability for scientists to go and actually do research, they thought, let's go ahead and do that as well. So while they were actually building the two ships, Viking Octantis and Viking Polaris, they actually incorporated then the science element into that. So they thought out how to do an entire science lab that's based on that, that's on the ships, and being able to do long-term research projects, dedicated research, data collection, and working with people all around the world in order to achieve those goals.
And what kind of research are you currently doing?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So we do a whole bunch of different kinds of research right now. My background is specifically in marine geology and geophysics. And so when I started my PhD, I didn't really know everything that I thought I would have liked to learn. And so my background specifically worked on a little bit of the both sides of sedimentology as well as the geophysics using multi-beam sonar systems. And what that does is actually mapping the seafloor. And so when I joined Viking, I actually was really excited because they do a big project that's similar to that, where they have their own multi-beam sonar system, which we just got online. And we're actually officially using and helping close a lot of the gaps of the seafloor that currently are still there. We've mapped less than 50% of our world's oceans. And on top of it, in the Great Lakes, where we also operate, there's been less than about 16% of the lakes mapped to a high resolution. So we're working on dedicating a lot of that mapping time to those efforts, as well as looking at the different geology patterns and oceanographic patterns, which means that we also measure the systems. We have a whole bunch of sensors on board. That water runs through a pipeline system coming from under the hull of the ship, run through the sensors, and then through that, we're also able to collect samples for microplastics research as well. Before then, the water's then emptied out overboard on ship. So we do microplastics, we do seafloor mapping, we do plankton research. Right now, we also just have opened up our first PCR, which means that we're able to sequence genetic samples while at sea. And right now we're focusing with Scripps Institution of Oceanography on being able to focus on kind of sequencing the DNA of the plankton that live in not only in Antarctica, but we're looking into expanding it as well into the aquatic environments, such as those of the Great Lakes as well. We also do a lot of drone work. So we have two different types of drones on board for the science team. We have an aerial drone that's actually a DJI Mavic 3 multispectral virtual drone. And that means that it can take images in a different range of the color spectrum. So it really helps with being able to detect certain types of vegetation, as well as certain growth patterns that might occur depending on whether or not there's ice cover in certain areas for coastal environments. And our underwater drone is known as a remotely operated vehicle, and that's an ROV, which can actually go all the way down to 300 meters deep, collect temperature data, and collect a lot of video and imagery of the surrounding habitat and environments that are there. And then last but not least, we also have what's called a baited remote underwater video system. And that's referring to this unique camera setup that we have with a bait can in front, where we're looking to attract the certain kinds of organisms and animals that live in a certain area and attract them to come into field of view of the images or of the cameras. And then we're able to then see what's in this environment. And because the cameras are calibrated to the end of the bait can, we can also measure the size of the animals as well, which is a unique feature for these specific types of baited remote underwater video systems.
Okay, that is all just incredibly cool. And I was thinking as you were talking, I had read that, we know more about the surface of Mars than we do about our own oceans in terms of what lies beneath. And so it
Absolutely.
feels to me like you're sort of at the forefront of doing some really cool exploration. Does it feel like that to you?
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of our waters are deep down. Only about less than 20% of the world's waters are above 200 meters. And so we're really on the exploratory edge of these environments. And there's a lot of great work done by various entities throughout the world in just exploring the deep sea ocean. But what's also not being explored are the polar regions. And so there's just simply not enough scientists around to actually go down there and do a lot of the work. And so we're really excited to be able to dedicate a lot of that kind of research for so long of a period that we're in Antarctica. And next year, when we start off in the Arctic, we're looking into that as well. And so being able to explore what kind of geology there is, what kind of environments there are, the overall habitats in the underwater environment. Oh, and also I forgot to mention that we also launch weather balloons on Viking Octantis and Viking Polaris as well. And so it's a lot of fun to be able to do that.
And one of the things I'm thinking as you're talking is everything's interconnected. As we look at climate change, as we look at our changing planet, we connect what's going on with the oceans to what's going on with the ecosystems. You talked about the plankton and the krill and how that impacts penguins and seals and whales and their lives, but it also impacts us as humans. Everything is interconnected. How do you sort of, I guess, zero in on this is what we're going to study?
Absolutely. So everything is intertwined and connected in that regards. And so how we've determined how we're looking at the different perspectives and projects in certain areas is really we want to be able to tell the full story of what's at every site and what that site can tell us in regards to that, whether it be from the plankton, which then relate to how temperature and oxygen impact the water environment, which is then impacted by how the atmosphere then talks to them. And then that in regards goes to, the seals and the whales, like you just mentioned. So we take a lot of regard of looking into what data currently exists in what area, and then building off that data set and exactly what story are we trying to tell, or in certain regards where there has been very little to no data collected in stuff, what is the start of the story? So we need to first take as much data as we can, collect as much data as we can in those environments, and then start to look through it and see what the story is from there before we actually decide what other data frames are we going to focus on for that region.
Well, and I love the idea of looking at it as what is the story that we're going to tell and, what story exists here. I think that for so many people, our scientific storytelling has not been particularly effective in terms of the layperson. And so when you can take what's going on in the data and be able to turn it into a compelling story that people understand, I think it helps fuel a desire to take care of things a little bit better, that conservation ethos as well. So I love that aspect of what you're doing.
It's a lot of fun, and being able to really share that is a fantastic way that also encourages that kind of talk between scientists and the community and citizens all over the world, because this is their world just as much as it is anyone else's. And being able to be on a cruise ship really enables us to work with people directly, because we collect the data on there, but we have a whole team and a whole group of guests on board that are always eager to learn and see what there is around them, and we're able to then show them the data that's being collected right there on the ship while they're there with us. And it's a fantastic way that we can really integrate people into the actual data science collection, and being able to have that kind of connectivity is a great way that we can tell that story, see how it is, see how, being a scientist does not need to be something that is so far removed from what people every day are doing. We're bringing these people with us to actually collect the data, and it's a lot of fun to be able to do that. And then they go home and they're able to then, tell that story further to their own families, and hopefully, we get that then support and positivity for what ends up being that kind of data collection. Because again, like you said, this kind of information is crucial for climate change and for our own day-to-day lives. We need to be able to know this information so we can make proper decisions.
And one of the things you and I talked about when I was lucky enough to be one of your guests, is we talked a little bit about the role of women in STEM, and particularly the fact that you are the chief scientist on board this ship. To me, that makes my little girl heart so happy. How did you get there? What were your adventures in learning that have led you to this point?
That is a phenomenal question. And I would like to state that in total, between Polaris and Octantis, there are 4 chief scientists. So we rotate on and off. And right now, 3 out of those 4 are also our women, including myself. And
That's
so it's a great
incredible.
opportunity for all of us to be able to work hard and to be able to get to these places. And, like we just talked about, this role did not exist beyond a couple years ago. Since the Viking Octantis first launched at the end of 2021, there have very few opportunities to kind of have this role of science meets guest interaction and go and do a lot of exploratory work. And so my role was never, I never thought, ooh, I'm going to be the first female to do much, because we already had so much of that being paved way in the generation prior to that. And so part of my work was just being interested in continuing to ask questions. Even sometimes, during school time, I might not have done a great job at a certain subject or whatnot. And, teachers, some were very encouraging and some weren't, but I really decided that I wanted to make sure to progress this myself, because this is what I wanted to do. And so if I wasn't good at it, I would try double as hard to make sure that I got better grades so that I could learn it, even though I didn't like it. And then I just continued on the path forward. And throughout my time in school, I said yes to certain opportunities, and those opportunities then led to another opportunity. And some ended up being a really great experience. I mean, they were all experiences overall, but I really got to figure out what I ended up liking and what I didn't like by just being able to say yes. If it's something I wasn't sure about, I still said yes, because I wanted to know if it was something that I really liked or enjoyed, but I just didn't know it until you have that opportunity. And so throughout my time, just saying here and there yes to certain opportunities led me that after my PhD, I worked with NOAA. Actually, I worked at NOAA in the deep sea ocean exploration. And so it was a fantastic opportunity to be part of a team there, because again, there were a lot of females that were also very supportive and encouraging and making sure you had the opportunities that you were seeking. And then when I found out about the opportunity at Viking, it was just, I thought that was so cool. And I was like, oh, it would be really cool. I don't know if I'll get it, or that job sounds so cool and I don't know if I'm cool enough for it. But I decided, you know what? It's always a no if you don't try. So I sent in my resume, I sent in the application, and lo and behold, 3 weeks later, I was signing my contract and I moved out of Washington, D.C. And then I ended up working at Viking, and it ended up just really being between persistence and curiosity and just taking a chance and saying, let's give it a shot. Let's see where it goes. If it doesn't work out, there's always going to be something else. And so I thought, now is the time, because I can, and no one can tell me that I can't do something. So it's a lot of fun to be able to push that and be part of that, and talk to a whole bunch of people, because again, they see a female scientist role being filled, and it's really crucial to gain that kind of leveling and work, and especially the type of work that we have to do. I don't just sit in the science lab. I need to coordinate with the rest of the ship on what we're capable of doing for that day, and what the needs are for science, and then talking to the rest of the ship, like the captain, like the team on the bridge, because we always have to connect to each other in order to decide what is possible and what's not. And so it's a huge team effort, and being a female that works on that level and having the respect of all of my peers is a really great way that we're able to continue forging those major pathways that the generation before us had. So we will always continue.
And who were some, you mentioned the women who came before you and the people who sort of paved the way. Who were your STEM role models or your science role models?
So it's a hard question because there are so many, and a lot of them also, it's always been a mix between, there are certain male role model figures as well as female role model figures. Sylvia Earle has always been a huge fan. I've always been a huge fan of Sylvia
Yes.
Earle, and I would love if at some point in my career I got to meet her and sit down and have a dinner with her and talk about all of her experiences. That's been someone that I've always looked up to. A lot of the women, even in roles that weren't, famously known, have really supported and helped me throughout those times. And I have to say, part of that was also my mother. She is not, science oriented or anything. She has had her career more in business aspects, but she was always one to continue to push us and to say, you can do anything that you want and go for it. And even though my mom tries really hard to fully understand a lot of the work that I've done in the past, she was able to just recently come on a voyage, and so she got to see me working full hand on it, and she said, this is fantastic. I'm so proud. And being able to be that person that, not necessarily gave me permission, but gave me the courage to go and be independent, to say yes, and not always to take no for an answer. And so it was a lot of fun to be able to have a mom like that, and to, forge our own paths and be creative and go forth and do it. And I had many role models and many teachers throughout the years be very encouraging for that factor as well, female as well as male. And it's been a fantastic road so far.
I love that. For me, I'm realizing I love Sylvia Earle. One of my sort of lifelong inspirations has been Jane Goodall. And
Yes.
the idea of being a naturalist and observing the world around you and being very systematic in what you observe and raising questions that people don't think about. And, she's the tip of the iceberg. She's the one I would, if you could have a dinner party and sit down with anybody, she's on my list.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But you're right. There are so many people, and it's day-to-day people. It's the folks you meet like you, Dr. Kim, and it's the people you meet who just share a passion and a love for the planet and are finding ways to tell that story. And I think that that's so cool. And I'm glad you had a mom who supported you that way. I think that's awesome. What are some of the biggest issues that you see facing scientists today?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. We had just spoken about, female role models and female scientists in the world, and while that has taken a significant leap forward and is improving, there is still a lot of work to be done in that field. We still need women in science. We're not fully equal yet in terms of how many there are, and also, there's still a huge pay gap in between, male scientists and female scientists going around, and just like in every other industry that there is. And there is also, on the bigger scale, there needs to be a lot more communication that happens on the interdisciplinary forms of science. There's still huge separations between different elements and different departments in science when you talk about physics or geology or biology or atmospheric science. And it seems that recently a lot of that has started to really come together because we've started to realize how much interconnectivity there is between every element of that. But there definitely needs to be a bit of a role to have that a little bit more open to communication. And that actually goes with being able to share data, being able to share data as well as publications. instead of, having higher up institutions being able to afford publications or even submitting publications to certain journals and only qualifying those scientists that have been able to achieve those kinds of publications or networking capabilities. I think by having a lot of more of the FAIR principles, which stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and I believe the term is, sorry,
That's okay.
they're interoperable and reproducible. And so being able to have access to this kind of data is crucial for a lot of people around the world, not just females, but scientists from all walks of life, in being able to have access to that data so that they can progress their own careers as well. And we have started to move in that direction, but I definitely think there is a lot of more work to do there as well. And that's what I'm really hoping to also achieve in this job, where we're able to access and put all of our data in a network so that it is publicly available for everyone to have access to.
I think that that is so important. And I think also finding ways to encourage children from all backgrounds to approach STEM and science as a potential career. And I'm wondering, based on your own experiences, what would you recommend to teachers and educators and families in terms of encouraging kids to go into this field?
I would say just let their curiosity take off. Don't discourage anything. If they have an interest in it, let them see how far it goes. The worst thing you could do with your kids is tell them, no, you can't do that because it's, you're not old enough, or you're not someone that I want to do that. Let them explore. They need to be able to touch and feel and look at the world in a new way. And they are new. They haven't had that influence yet, that you and I that have experienced through our own experiences. They need their own experiences, and they need to learn that, X plus Y equals Z. And so being able to come up with that on their own really helps encourage their curiosity and expand that factor. And having someone in my life that was very also nature oriented, my mom was great. It was something, we had a backyard with a lot of fruit trees and everything, and we didn't use any pesticides. And so when there were actual butterflies coming in and laying their eggs for the nest or whatnot, we would say, oh my god, let's go look at this and see what it's like. We had old school encyclopedias around all the time. If there was an encouragement to get, a book about animals or dinosaurs or bugs or something, it was never a no. While, we couldn't always get the newest and brightest elements of that, she always took us to the library. There were always elements where we would spend hours in the library, get to pick our own books of what we wanted to do, and encourage, there's so many nature documentaries around. If they're curious about that, television doesn't always have to mean one specific genre or another. You can have them explore into different elements, and it's a fantastic world to be part of. Go exploring. If you can travel, I highly encourage it. It's fantastic, but stay curious. Ask, why is it like this? Why is something like this? And just by continuously asking why, or noticing something small, it can really help encourage that. And, I had a fun fifth grade teacher. I still remember her, Mrs. Nudd, if you're out there, hi. She really helped expand my curiosity as well. She brought animals to the classroom, and we had connectivity between different levels of grades throughout our classes. And so we would take time to, as a fifth grader, help with the first graders or the kindergartners, teaching them to read and explore and look at things. We had mice, we had hamsters, we had fish, and we had a snake overall. And it was so cool to be able to really get to know what these animals were and how they were. And, again, kudos again back to my mom, because she was just the coolest, or she is the coolest. She is just the coolest person. And, she always let us have different kinds of pets as well. So we had, all the different kinds of hamsters and mice. And, we have a snake who we actually just had to give to someone else, because it was my brother's snake. And when he moved away, he couldn't bring it with him because he doesn't live in an apartment anymore. And so we found a great new home for him. His name's Chester. He was a ball python snake, and he's about 6.5 feet long now. And we had a great time having him around. We had fish, we had all these different elements, and we got to go to the stores and look at the ones. And my mom always encouraged us, pick the one that's your favorite and see how it goes. And it was never being shying away from looking at something that the natural world is part of. There is a cycle to life, and being part of that and bringing us out to the national parks and seeing what there is around us was a great way that it was always enabled me and my friends, because being my friend, apparently they didn't have a choice. My mom said, "What? You've never been to the Florida Everglades?" Where, we grew up in Miami. So what do you mean you haven't been out there? That's it. This weekend you're coming over. We're going to the Everglades and we're going to go on a hike. And so, and my friends would show up Saturday morning, 9 a.m. They were there, and it was exciting. We went camping. It was so much fun. Go explore, have fun. There's so much the world can offer.
I love all of that. I think your mother and I would have been best friends. Um, so, kind of the last question I had wanted to ask you today is you've had the privilege of traveling the world. What are the craziest or coolest adventures that you've had?
Oh, that's hard because, I still have so much left to see. Right now, part of the most amazing adventures I've had are during my college experience. I actually was able to do a study abroad system, and I lived 3.5 months in the Galapagos Islands.
Wow.
And I lived with a host family that was there, and so I was fully immersed not just in nature but in the culture that was surrounding that as well, of the people that chose to live, literally that island life. And it was absolutely incredible, being surrounded by the culture. The food was always incredible and so fresh because everything was right there, and being able to really just be surrounded by that environment. We went snorkeling, I went diving, I got to see all the different kinds of marine iguanas and the different flora and fauna that are associated in the Galapagos, and endemic to the Galapagos. They only live there. And being able to be not just visit for a week or two, but having that experience where I worked really hard through school, and it did cost extra, but being able to then save up and afford it, and being able to go and fully immerse myself in that experience. My family was very much like, "Oh my God, you can't give this up. Go for it. Do whatever you need." And it was so much fun. It was my first time being away from my family for so long. But at the same time, I still talk to my host family. We Skype every now and then, and it was great. I see the kids growing up, and it feels like they're part of my family now as well. And it was so much fun. But then, of course, now working for Viking, I got to experience now Antarctica. I've done 2 full seasons in Antarctica now, and it is absolutely one of the most amazing experiences that currently there is to offer. I believe so, as far as nature and an environment that people aren't made to live in. And so by having this almost untouched area still in its beautiful form that it is absolutely incredible to go see. And so by being able not just to go see it, but also explore in it, collect the data, get to know it on a molecular level, is a phenomenal way that we can actually see all there is about this. And despite me having now up to 6 months to 8 months down there in total, it's still almost brand new every time I go. I'm wowed constantly because there's always something new that happens that you never think it does. And if it doesn't happen to me, but happens to one of my friends or one of my colleagues or a guest, and they come and they're so excited about it, it makes my day that much better. Being able to share these experiences is a phenomenal way that everyone can learn and then enjoy out of it in the long run. And so I think being able to educate the people in the environment that they are in around them and getting them to see what there is an incredible experience. It's so much fun. I love doing it. And I really hope that instills and it resonates within the people that get to experience that as well. And then they get to bring that excitement home and hopefully inspire that next generation.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today, Dr. Kim. You have certainly inspired me, and I have a feeling there are listeners out there who are going to take a look at the world in a slightly different way.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Diane.